You're doing the Lord's work. Okay. Did Senator Yee, is he still here? He stepped out. Okay, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break here until we get some authors back in the committee. We just need
Labor took you to get a quiet vote on the bill, and then they're sending a pass Mike escort.
So all members, please return. And we have an author, Senator Yee, who has 2 bills in front of us this morning. Item 2, SB 240, and item 5, SB 596. So why don't we begin with item 2, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This bill comes back to this particular body after a hiatus, and we have now changed this particular bill. It started out as a polling place bill, and now it is a drop-off location bill. In the last statewide election, Madam Chair, the California increased its voter roll to a record high of 18.2 million registered voters. At the same 2012 election, 6,753,688 voters cast their vote by a vote-by-mail ballot of VBM, accounting for 51.16% of the total votes cast. As you can imagine, if you look at some of the historical data, each election we are finding an increasing number of individuals using the vote-by-mail process. And so the question then becomes, how can we, number one, I think, ensure the security of these particular drop-off locations, and then in addition to that, continue to encourage people to use either vote by mail or to participate in this electoral process. So what this bill will do is to require that county election officials shall place at least one ballot box drop-off location within each campus of the CSU and the UC, and then to have election officials just simply consider establishing these kinds of drop-off box location on a community college campus if there's a demand and there is convenient. There were a number of concerns raised in the election committee, and those concerns are reflected in the amendments that we are about to take. Let me just say in summary that the essence of those concerns had to do with the security of these particular drop-off box location, and the amendments address, hopefully, those concerns. I would also note that if we do not adopt this particular bill and get it signed, then right now there are no regulations as to how these drop-off locations are established and the securities related to that. It is really up to individual counties. I think that the chair of the election committee reported a particular example that she saw where it seemed rather vague as to the security and the way in which these drop-off box locations were established. With this particular bill, there is now language that will require that if these county officials are in fact going to establish these drop-off box location, that they will be in fact secure, and that there will be a chain of custody established for these particular ballot box or ballot that are submitted into the drop-off box location. So with that, urge and I vote, and I have Anthony Intweet representing California Faculty Association.
Okay, thank you. In support.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Andrew Antwi here today on behalf of the California Faculty Association. Our professors, coaches, librarians, and lecturers see the impact of having convenient ways for vote by mail, for youth vote. We support this bill. We think that the election turnout rate will continue to increase. California is at the forefront, 28% in the last presidential. We think that can go higher. We ask for your aye vote.
Okay. Others in support?
Madam Chair, members, Bart Broom representing Secretary of State Deborah Bowen. The Secretary has no official position on this bill at this time. She appreciates the intention to make it easier for college students to return their vote-by-mail ballots. However, before the state authorizes the use of drop-off locations and drop-off boxes, there are some key statutory protections that are needed to keep voted ballots safe. Some of our concerns are addressed by the proposed committee amendments, and we thank this committee and the Elections Committee for those. Specifically, drop boxes should be staffed to ensure that ballot envelopes are properly signed and sealed and that they're not intended for another jurisdiction. Also, drop boxes should be locked and sealed with tracking numbers, and emptied using strict chain of custody procedures. So all of that is good, and that's already included in the committee recommended amendments. However, there remain several concerns that must be addressed. The statutory language should be clear that drop boxes with voted ballots should never be left unattended, and always should be staffed by a person or persons appointed by the elections official. The statute should require that drop boxes be emptied daily. The committee amendments say that during non-business hours, a vote-by-mail ballot box must be placed in a locked and secure location. This language needs to be a little more specific. You may already know that current law doesn't allow voted ballots to remain anywhere except in the post office and in the elections office. And so we feel like that it should be more specific. Daily collection and delivery of voted ballots to the elections office is a very important safeguard and should be included. And finally, the use of drop boxes should be restricted to the few days prior to the election, when Postal Service delivery may not be timely. Before that time, every mailbox and every post office is a drop-off location. The challenge is that drop-off locations lack the extensive statutory and polling place procedures for handling voted ballots. They also lack the focus of several poll workers and other stakeholders present to observe the handling of voted ballots. So by using drop-off locations judiciously, we reduce the risk of theft, fraud, or damage of voted ballots. These security procedures are too important to be left to agency guidelines and should be clearly defined in law to protect the security of vote-by-mail ballots. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any others in support? Is there opposition to the bill? Seeing no opposition, are there questions from members? Senator Hupp.
I'm a little curious about that last testimony because it sounded like it was at the time of support, but it said there's some material needs in how it's spelled out. Could you quantify that a little bit more?
Here, why don't I do this? Let me read the amendments, because I know that there were references made about how tight it was going to be, and I'm not sure that the individual representing those statements knew exactly what we have in the amendment. So let me just, so that everybody's clear, all right, that in the amendments that we are going to take, it says the following, all right, a drop-off box location shall consist of a secure vote-by-mail ballot box, staffed by at least one individual appointed by the election official, that allows return envelopes and once deposited to only be removed by persons appointed by the election official. The placement and security of each drop-off location shall be determined by the election official in accordance with guidelines by the Secretary of State. A drop-off location located outdoors must be constructed of durable materials able to withstand inclement weather during non-business hours, or when a staff is not available. A vote-by-mail box must be placed in a locked and a secure location.
Would you read that last little bit again?
During non-business hours or when a staff is not available, a vote-by-mail ballot box must be placed in a locked and a secure location.
That mean it's not accessible?
That's right.
Okay.
From no more than 29 days prior to election until 8 p.m. on election day, 2 people who are appointed by the election official must empty each ballot drop-off box with sufficient frequency to prevent damage and unauthorized access to the ballots. Vote-by-mail ballot drop boxes must be locked and sealed at all times with a seal log that documents each time the box is opened, by whom, and the number of ballots removed. Ballots must be placed into a sealed transport carrier and returned to the election official office or another designated location at 8 p.m. on election day. All ballot drop-off boxes must be empty and sealed to prevent the deposit of additional ballots. I think there was one other point about the legality of these. the election code, within the amendments that we are looking at, the election code 3017 will be amended to specify that VBM ballot box locations legally constitute returning the ballot in person to the election official from whom it came.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to look at additional language to satisfy, security. I mean, look, people die for the ability to vote, and we're not, and I'm not going to allow any diminution of the security and integrity of that particular vote. And I think that what we're trying to do is to make it easier for individuals to participate in our election process. We can say, well, these are the high hurdles, and we're not going to blink whatsoever. But if our goal is to help young people participate in the democratic process, we ought to kind of look at other things that are a little bit more convenient and easy, but just as secure. I mean, the online voter registration was all about that. We could just simply tell people, well, the only way you're going to register is you got to go down to the Department of Election, regardless of how busy and whatever you may be. But we decided that it was important to try and find a secure way to help people register to vote. All we're doing with this drop-off box, and we did not go with the polling place because of some concern on the part of the county election officials, that we said, well, why don't we look at least the drop-off box? Now, if it turns out that at some point along the way these drop-off boxes are so successful that we could then, in fact, turn them into polling places, I'm all for that. But again, we're just trying to make it a little bit easier and more convenient so that more people participate in the electoral process.
Okay.
So if I could
sorry.
follow up, so as he read his amendments, did those satisfy the concerns that you had raised about providing integrity for the ballots and the chain of custody?
Not precisely. Our concern with the language in the committee amendments is just that it needs to be more specific. Locked and secure could mean many things. It could mean locked in the trunk of my car.
Right.
It could mean take it into City Hall and put it in a closet. There are more secure measures than that for voted ballots typically. And so we would be looking for more specificity in the law. But I would reiterate that the Secretary hasn't taken a position on the bill. So it's not that we're here saying, don't do this. We're simply saying that there needs to be prudent security procedures, and they need to be in statute, and they need to have the force of law.
And I think that's where my level of concern is. I think we want to encourage people to vote. I certainly agree with that. We want to make it easy, not difficult. But we also want to protect the integrity of it, because that is, one man, one vote, or one person, one vote is, what this country was founded upon. And you don't want anybody to violate that process. I feel a little uncomfortable as an education committee talking about something that's an elections issue, and it doesn't have the specificity that could be and probably should be there when we're dealing with something like this. So it seems like the question we ought to have, should we locate a drop box with appropriate security at these institutions? And that would be a yes or a no. And then the other thing is, flip it to somebody else to come up with those appropriate securities, which is not us. I mean, we don't deal with that stuff, nor do we have staff equipped to
The
do
only
that.
reason why this bill is here, I think, is because the location of these the drop boxes are
What's the
on
next path for
campuses.
this? Is this,
It's supposed to go to appropriations.
and it doesn't go to any more policy committees?
No more policy committees. Oh, sure, okay. She's an elections.
Just one last thing. My understanding of elections code right now is it doesn't permit or allow for drop boxes, even though there's some that are being done around here. And so I think it is something we need to get right. I would just ask you, Mr. Author, by what authority would we even do drop boxes under current law? Do you know?
I mean, you have the chair of the election committee, but my understanding right now is that, if in fact a particular election official at the county level decides to put a drop box, they can do that. Now, there are, variations in terms of how it's done. The Sacramento County, that election official, has it done fairly well. And she has a manual that she gives out to all individuals that, deal with election drop-off boxes, and in other cases, they're not. You know, I guess the point that I would also make is that, look, this bill was heard in the election committee. The election staff looked at it and offered these amendments. Now, if the Secretary of State office thinks that we ought to be tighter, then we're more than happy to look at language and work with the Secretary of State. But you know, they haven't come into us and said, hey, gee, you know, these are some ideas. We have not rejected any ideas coming from the Secretary of State. You know, do I want it tighter? Of course I want it tighter to ensure the integrity of the particular ballot that, you know, that is submitted. But given the language that we have, you know, we thought it was tight enough. If it's not, we are interested. It's going to still go to one more committee, and then it goes to the floor. And if at that point, you know, you all didn't think that it was tight enough, then, you know, we can defeat it. But the reality is that I think that we have moved quite away from the original idea of a polling place that clearly had some problems. And now we're at this point, we have had a rather vigorous discussion at the Elections Committee talking about making it tighter. If the Secretary of State feels that we wanted to make it more tight, we're more than happy to do that.
With the Elections Committee Chair, Senator Money? Senator Money?
Just a quick question. I apologize, I didn't hear your original presentation, but I know the bill that would have placed election polling places on campuses has not become law. However, many campuses do have a polling place on them. The local county elections officials have established a polling place on a campus. In that situation, would this vote-by-mail drop box be located where the polling place is established, as opposed to having, you're not suggesting setting up a separate mechanism? If there is a polling place, my understanding is under current law, you can drop a ballot at a polling place that is a vote-by-mail ballot.
This bill would complement an existing polling place at a campus, in that if you know, polling places are only on that fateful Tuesday. These drop boxes have a longer life.
I see.
And what happens oftentimes is that in the busyness of classes that you take, exams that you may take, or whatever it may be, that if you don't get it in that day, then you're out of luck. At least with the drop boxes, if you've got a class on Tuesday, you can drop it off on Monday. And it just gives a little bit, you know, a bigger window for individuals to participate.
That parallels the current vote-by-mail window.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Torres?
Yes, Senator Yee, I want to applaud your efforts in encouraging young folks to vote and participate in, you know, every election available to them. You have done a great job, and I want to thank you for taking all of my committee amendments. On the issue, there was a question asked about the code, whether drop boxes are allowed or not. Frankly, the code is silent on that issue. So, you know, it's not banned. So there are counties out there that do have drop boxes. I am pretty satisfied on the issue whether they are secured, these boxes are secured or not, with the amendments that you have taken out of my committee. I think that the security far outweighs the security at a mailbox. We have mailboxes, you know, in many places, some street corners. One can venture out and think about what could happen in those, with those ballots inside those postal boxes. Other than a, you know, a felony on your record if you're caught vandalizing one of these boxes, there is nothing from stopping mischievous act on a mailbox that is on a public street corner. So I am satisfied with that issue. The bigger issue for me is that while we want to guarantee students, we want to guarantee them the ability to be able to drop off their ballot on Election Day, there isn't enough information out there for out-of-county students. In this last election, one of the busiest polling locations in the county was in my city, and it was Cal Poly Pomona. The reason for that is that they had a polling location there. Students were encouraged, come out and vote, it's your right. There was a lot of work done around that. But they were not told, if you don't live on campus, or if this is not your designated polling location, you cannot vote here. So the lines were long because students, from San Bernardino County, adjacent county, Riverside County, all were trying to vote there, and many voted by
Absentee.
provisional ballot. Yes. So what happens to the ballots that are dropped from adjacent counties or adjacent locations? If it's not the county immediately, if it's not the county whose jurisdiction is to receive that ballot, then we are silent on what happens to that ballot. And I think that's a question that still has not been addressed.
Well, on provisional votes, this has nothing to do with provisional votes.
If a student drops off their ballot and a student is from an adjacent county and they put it in that drop box, who is there to say this ballot does not belong in this drop box? And on election night, that ballot will be late, so that ballot would be void. There isn't enough time for that county register of voters to mail that ballot to the next county.
So if I can just kind of talk about, absent this bill, individuals would then mail their absentee ballots into a mailbox. If they don't put the appropriate postage, then it's void. If it doesn't get to their intended destination, it'll be void. At least with the drop-off box, you don't need postage in order to receive the particular ballot. So that's a good thing. You've got students who maybe spend all their money on something else and they don't have money for postage. So that's a good thing. The reality is that now we will have an individual that will be managing or monitoring that particular drop-off box.
So will that individual be able to check for county of origin prior to that ballot being dropped in the drop box?
And the answer to that is exactly what you mentioned, and that is that currently there's no regulations whatsoever about the drop boxes at all, drop box location. At least this begins the process of putting some of those regulations into the drop boxes. In the amendment that we took in your committee, it said that the individual who would be designated to monitor those drop boxes are appointed by the election official. So, I guess in the course of this bill being implemented, that the election official would in fact be training, just like they train all the poll workers, what are the appropriate rules and regulations relating to whatever is dropped off. And at that point, the individual who is appointed by the election official will then tell them that this ballot measure or this ballot that you are dropping is not in fact going to be in or is in this particular county, and it needs to then be transported to another county. And so on.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any other conversation, concerns about this bill? Would you like to close, Senator Yee?
Well, just to thank you for your consideration. I know that this is the second year in which we have dealt that. We appreciate the care and concern you've given to this particular bill and with your staff, and with that urgent I vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion on the bill? The bill has been moved. Let's call the roll.
The motion is to pass as amended to appropriations. Luke?
Aye.
Lou, aye. Wyland? Block? Aye. Block, aye. Correa?
Aye.
Correa, aye. Hancock? Wessel?
Aye.
Wessel, aye. Huff?
No.
Huff, no. Monning?
Aye.
Monning, aye. Torres?
It's 5 to 1, you have to follow.
Okay, 5 to 1. The bill is out, but we'll hold the roll open for absent members.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then you have item 5, SB 596.